Texas and Georgia meet at the Sugar Bowl. We're breaking down the Bulldogs and the Longhorns right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We've got Steve Helwick on the line. You can join him at the Daily Texan. He also does quite a bit of work there at the University of Texas campus television station. Steve, hope you're doing well today. What were your initial impressions of the bowl matchup, which wasn't a surprise? It was projected by many, if Georgia was not able to make the playoff, that they would slot into the Sugar Bowl against Texas. But your thoughts about this matchup?
The matchup's a little tough because it's one of the few bowl games with a double-digit spread. Texas made it because the Big 12 has a contract with the Sugar Bowl in non-playoff years where they had to get a team in. And they announced before the Big 12 championship game that their runner-up was going to be put in the Sugar Bowl if Oklahoma made the playoff. So that already locked Texas a spot into the game, win or lose, as long as the Sooners made the playoffs. So we knew Texas was going to go to this bowl, and Georgia, with the loss to Alabama, ended up in the bowl too. So we have a Georgia-Texas matchup. Doesn't look the most even on paper, with Texas ranked about 10 spots below Georgia on the poll right now. But this, regardless of the result of this game, this has been an incredible Texas season, as Tom Herman has already taken the Longhorns ahead of schedule on their development and progress through 2 years of the program. Meanwhile, Georgia, very disappointing finish to the season. The Bulldogs were a play away, whether it's Blankenship's made 30-yard field goal, not running a fake punt on 4th and 11. They're probably a play away from beating Alabama on the SEC championship game and getting the 3 or 4 seed in the playoff for the second straight year. Instead, the Bulldogs will be playing in the Sugar Bowl, but don't think that the Sugar Bowl is just going to be a letdown performance for the Bulldogs. You have to think in the past of teams that have been snubbed from the playoff. 2014 TCU, they go to beat Ole Miss 42-3 in the Peach Bowl. 2015 Stanford, they beat Iowa 45-16 in the Rose Bowl. And then we go down to 2017 Ohio State, 24-7 win, defensive domination against USC in the Cotton Bowl. Those teams come out the most motivated, and Texas needs to watch for that.
So, yeah, I think it's a good point that you make, because the initial thought by many would be, okay, they got snubbed or they missed out on the college football playoff. And this was a team definitely in Georgia, after coming this close to winning a national championship and taking Alabama to overtime. That was the goal, to get back to the college football playoff, win a national championship. But as you allude to there, you can go through the examples of teams that were motivated by missing out, whether that was a clear, we needed to win this game, we didn't win it, we lost in excruciating fashion like a Georgia and we missed, or we possibly had the resume to get in and we were snubbed. I can't think of any other examples on the other side. Possibly Penn State, although, you know, Penn State came out of nowhere, not expected, nor were the expectations to get to a college football playoff, but they did win the Big Ten, didn't get to a college football playoff appearance that year, went to the Rose Bowl, and even though they lost, they were certainly competitive and motivated to play well, and did play well in a 52-49 loss to USC. So, yeah, there has not been evidence of a team falling flat on its face because it didn't want to show up at a bowl game after missing the college football playoff. And to your other point, Texas at 15th in the nation, according to the college football playoff rankings, may be playing up all the way to number 1. You could make an argument that Georgia obviously outplayed Alabama for 55 minutes, something in that range, that Texas is playing one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a lot of people's argument for Georgia to the playoffs is, oh, if you want to do the best 4 teams, then you have to put Georgia in, although I think that the second loss should have eliminated them, especially with Oklahoma and Ohio State knocking on the door. But this is definitely the biggest – this could be the biggest challenge Texas faced all season. I'd say Georgia's about on par with Oklahoma on skill level. Different type of game they bring to the table. Georgia's more of a defensive team. You have Jim Thorpe Award winner DeAndre Baker on that defense, DeAndre Walker as a linebacker. Bulldogs are just talented all around on defense and one of the best teams in the nation in that regard. Offensively, very good run game. the passing game is not usually Georgia's strong suit, although I'll have to say Jake Fromm played the game of his life in that Alabama game, and you cannot pin the loss on him in any manner because that was one of Fromm's best games I've ever seen from him. He looked more than a game manager. He actually looked like a very good quarterback, a quarterback that could lead a team to the playoff, and I have to give Fromm a lot of props for that. So Georgia's a different type of team than Oklahoma, who's just going to get down the field really quickly, score a lot of points on you, and then hope for the best on defense. So Texas will have to play a different style against Georgia than they did against Oklahoma. Meanwhile, Texas, one advantage they have against Georgia is their pass defense. It's not the best on Texas, but their run defense is excellent. And Georgia attacks mainly on the run. So I think with Texas, with their 7 guys in the box, I think they could give Holyfield and DeAndre Swift some fits in the run game as they did with Oklahoma. Oklahoma struggled running in the Big 12 championship game. Even Kyler Murray, he didn't have his typical game on the ground that day. So I think the one thing that Texas could maybe beat Georgia on is stopping the run game.
So what do you make of Texas's performance in the Big 12 championship game? Because to me, they jumped out with a touchdown to tie the game at 7, and it was a 1-score game for the entire game until about the key play of the game might have been the safety, the sack of Sam Ehlinger after Texas got the strip on the long CeeDee Lamb play inside the 10-yard line, and then Texas is in great shape at I believe 32-27 or 30-27 at that point to get back in the game. They've got the ball. Then I forget who it was, came off the corner, sacks Ehlinger, and then they flip the field. They score the touchdown. They go up by 12 points, and even then Texas drove it right down the field. But that pretty much was the game changer right there, getting the defensive points and flipping the possession with about 5 or 6 minutes left.
I'm going to say Texas played an excellent game. I think going into that Big 12 championship game, they didn't really have much to lose. I know that sounds crazy in a conference championship game, but beating a team Oklahoma's caliber twice in one season, that's really hard to do. So I think Texas, they gave it their all. You saw them come out with fire. They had that 14-6 lead in the early going, looking good, but you can only stop Oklahoma's offense so many times. Oklahoma's offense got back in it, and before half, they had a 41-second possession, I think, to take a 20-14 lead going into the break. And Oklahoma then got the ball at halftime, 27-14. But then I thought the Texas response to that 27-14 deficit showed a lot about Tom Herman and this team. Just the resiliency. Texas is able to score a touchdown, make a stop, score another touchdown. And if it weren't for a missed extra point, Texas would have had a 28-27 lead going into the fourth quarter. So they were neck and neck. And then you mentioned the play earlier, CeeDee Lamb, he goes, I think, 56 yards down the field, and Texas's outside linebacker, Gary Johnson, comes from behind, forces a fumble, just great determination, sticking with the play. I mean, that went from a SportsCenter top 10 play for Oklahoma to being a top 10 play for Texas. And Gary Johnson forces that fumble, and suddenly Texas is down 3. Long field to work with, but they do have the ball against Oklahoma, and that's really important, especially considering Oklahoma's defense typically isn't that stout. I'll have to say the Sooners played great defense in the Big 12 championship game by their standards, limiting Texas to 27 points, making the run game completely ineffective, and I think forcing Ehlinger to 23 of 36 on completions. Not the most accurate day from him. But then Oklahoma decides it's a risky play. Corner blitz with Trey Brown coming from the edge. Unblocked, unprotected. That play changed the entire scope of the game and the entire scope of Texas and Oklahoma season from there. Just Trey Brown came in. He laid about as hard as a hit as you can do on Sam Ehlinger, forces a safety, and then you're trailing by 5. And when you're trailing by 5 and you give Kyler Murray the ball back in good field position, bad things are going to happen to your defense. And Oklahoma was able to capitalize with a great touchdown grab by tight end Grant Calcaterra. 12-point lead with under 4 minutes left, I think. That seals it from there. But still, despite the safety and all of that, I think Texas played an excellent game in the Big 12 championship. It looked like a good, respectable team, a team with a pretty good future, and I don't think any Longhorn fan should hang their heads on what happened Saturday morning.
No question. This has been a team that in a program since going to the BCS championship game in 2009 has obviously slipped from its lofty perch and from where people expect the program to be. And Tom Herman, in 2 seasons, you've seen the progress from not getting to postseason play and finishing under 500 to winning a bowl game last year against Missouri to coming within, the final 5 minutes of the game on a neutral field against Oklahoma and beating the Sooners in the Red River rivalry game. So, yeah, the progress is substantial. It's right there in the results. Georgia should be a favorite. They certainly are a substantial favorite, but at the same time, we've seen it play out in a number of bowl games through the years in which Texas is capable of showing up and just they've got nothing to lose. Again, they are not considered to be the team that's going to come out with a win in this game and can just maybe run some gadget plays and maybe on special teams that they just let it all hang loose and possibly come up with an upset.
They definitely could. I do think Georgia wins this game by around the number of points on the spread, just because Georgia's a great team, and I think this is a tough matchup for Texas. I would compare this to the 2016 Sugar Bowl between Oklahoma and Auburn. Auburn was an 8-4 team that year that got in because the SEC had the contract with the Sugar Bowl in a non-playoff year. So you had to put – that's the only other 4-loss team that's made a New Year's Six Bowl in the college football playoff era, 2014 to present. And Auburn was just steps behind Oklahoma in that game. Like, you could tell coming out of the gate that the Tigers probably deserved a matchup more on their par, and the Sooners probably deserved a better team to play. I could see something like that happening. But what I know about this Texas team is they're fighters. That was their worst loss all year, that 12-point loss to Oklahoma, and that game was much closer than the box score may have indicated. And they lost by 5 to Maryland. They lost by 3 to Oklahoma State. They lost by 1 to West Virginia. When Texas loses, and even when they win, a lot of their games are just one-possession games. So that's one thing that's really important going into this game to look at, is the Longhorns could force another close game with Georgia because they know how to make things interesting, this team, always playing on the level of their opponent every single week. So that could be something to notice. But last year, I remember in their bowl game, I think they were about 3-point underdogs to Missouri, especially with a lot of guys injured, a lot of guys missing the game, and with suspensions. Not many people thought they could stop Drew Lock and the Tigers offense. And then Texas came out with fire that game, beat a good SEC team that was on a pretty long winning streak. And the Longhorns won that game 33-16, just stopped Missouri's offense, and they turned their defensive stops into good plays offensively for them. So I think the Longhorns are more of a wild card team in this game. I mean, it's expected Georgia would win by about 10 points, but you never know with this Texas team that likes to fight teams close and down to the wire.
So these two teams faced in the 1984 Cotton Bowl, and Georgia deprived Texas of a national championship. The Longhorns came in at 11-0, and Georgia was a top 5 team and won the game 10-9. We would expect a few more points scored between DeAndre Swift, Sam Ehlinger, Colin Johnson, and all the talented players on both offenses this time around. Steve Helwig joining us from the Daily Texan, also at the University of Texas TV station. Steve, we appreciate you stopping by. Maybe we'll have you back and we can talk more about Texas and Georgia as we get closer to kickoff.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.